Hello, you're watching India Today Global with me, Ishita Mitra, and this is Race for the White House, a show where we get you the latest from the US elections. On today's show, we'll tell you about the key takeaways from the vice presidential debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz as the Republican candidate exceeded expectations. Also on the show, we bring you an exclusive interview with Democrat turned Republican Tulsi Gabbard, who talks about the future of American democracy. All of this and much more, so let's get started. Alright, so everyone's talking about the vice presidential debate. But the question on everyone's mind is, who won the contest? Well, was it calm and collected Tim Walz or the fiery, fast-talking JD Vance? I think we all can agree that Vance was the candidate who appeared to be more polished one, while Walz, on the other hand, took a time to warm up. But one thing is for sure that this is the debate America deserved. For more on this, catch our principal correspondent Shashank Mattu and our White House correspondent Rohit Sharma breaking down the VP debate for you.
Hello, welcome back to India Today Global. An exciting day today with the vice presidential debate between Minnesota Governor Tim Walz from the Democratic Party and Ohio Senator JD Vance, Donald Trump's running mate. This vice presidential debate, of course, a regular feature of US presidential elections. And today we got to see the two running mates of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump square off, lay out their policy platform, what they want to do. Quite an interesting debate. And frankly, me personally, I thought it was a much meatier, much healthier debate than what we've seen nationally through presidential candidates too. But joining me now to discuss this whole debate, what issues were discussed, and what he thought about it was our DC Valadesi, Rohit Sharma, our Washington DC correspondent. Rohit, you take it away. What did you think in terms of the debate, the key issues, and of course, we baited you here by talking to you about who we thought won. So why don't you tell us who you thought won as well?
I think, I think the first half of the debate, I think JD Vance was absolutely killing it. Right. I think he came across as somebody who's well prepared. He came across as somebody who knew exactly, his talking points. Right. If you go back and check, he did not mention Biden at all in his first round.
Right.
He was completely attacking Kamala Harris, to a point where he even said the Harris administration a lot of times.
Absolutely.
So I think JD Vance was doing great. And I think then Walz caught up with him. This reminded me of the debates we used to have prior to 2016. Right. You go back to Romney and, Obama. Right. And you go to Hillary Clinton. The 2008 cycle with Obama and McCain. I think very civil. One thing that we heard a lot was, I agree, both the candidates tried to find common ground and commonalities in some of the issues that they discussed. So very heartwarming if you're an American to watch politicians come together and talk about important issues, presenting their own vision.
Absolutely.
Who won the debate? I think by a slightest margin, I think JD Vance did.
Right.
And he again, the two things that you have to do as on a stage on VP debate is, first, do no harm to your candidate, and then build up your own self-worth to come across the presidential. And I think Vance was able to do that.
That's very interesting because, something you need to know about Rohit is that he's been in the States for 17 years. He's covered every presidential election since Obama versus McCain back in 2008. Someone who has a real experience seeing how American politics has changed. But I have to concur with Rohit here as well. We were watching the debate together, and I initially also got the sense that JD Vance, for all the social media controversy he's been getting, you might remember that he called people without children childless cat ladies and so on and so forth. He seemed quite vicious and nasty going into the debate, but I think he showed that he was able to switch on a different side of him, come across as very statesman-like, a very composed, calm debate performance, was able to represent his view much better and even empathize with the opposing side. In fact, one moment that I thought what Rohit was mentioning that really illustrated how both candidates were able to work together and at least try to come to a better conversation was when they were talking about gun violence, and Tim Walz, Governor Walz, sort of said that his 17-year-old had been caught in an incident of school violence and shooting, and JD Vance said, "Look, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry." And it was, and Governor was thanked him for it. So it was the kind of moment of honor that you're used to seeing in American politics.
And I just want to pick your opinion on this. I mean, you've been obviously, doing race for the White House, and you obviously have seen this. What was your initial reaction of seeing American politicians being just cordial?
Yes,
we don't see that anymore. It's very polarized in America.
It's funny, right? I think it triggered an old memory in my head, right? Which was that I was very young. I'm tipping my age here a little bit, but I was very, very young when the McCain-Obama debates happened, as well as Obama-Romney, and it was just that became the norm. I think that became the norm that which you judged American politics by. Someone like President Obama, who defined American cool at least for 8 to 9 years. Those were very thoughtful debates. Again, people who were extremely well qualified, where personal jibes were not an extremely important part of the electoral conversation. Like these two people, whatever you say about them, really represented the best forms of the argument for their particular parties. There was serious discussion on childcare tax credits in America. I came away slightly more informed about that, about defense policy in the Middle East, about housing and infrastructure. So there was serious conversation, and I felt that I also liked the personal aspects of the debate. I came away thinking, I think that as Rohit was saying, that look, you have to do no harm to your own candidate, and you have to build yourself up. And I think that on both those counts, actually, I think that both candidates did well on that front. Both candidates landed punches. I felt it was fairly even between the two candidates and how they performed. I also felt that it was not a question of who beat whom, but I felt like both candidates did well for themselves. I think Tim Walz represented the kind of brand that he wanted to represent, being someone who's folksy, Midwestern, a football coach. I think he got across to his audience. And I think JD Vance, I think, shall I say, won slightly more. I would say that because he turned a lot of the public narrative around about him, because there's a lot of questions about his competency, about the social media controversies he's been able to getting himself into, and he was able to represent himself as really calm, steady, middle of the way candidate. I was really struck when he's talking about abortion in a way that came across to me even as extremely empathetic, and I was impressed by that. So my sense was that Walz won. I felt JD Vance won more, and I think he set himself up well as someone who will want to contend for the Republican nomination.
So that's what everybody's saying, right? Like JD Vance did well. I mean, obviously, I could understand maybe the Jais are Republicans, so we'll probably talk more about that stuff. But I think even Walz did not have a bad night. He came in his own towards the end, or probably middle of the debate.
I think he was good. I think on particular issues where he was talking about, how he had owned a gun and has been someone who, has been out shooting, has been a hunter. He talked about his experience, as a teacher. He talked about his work in Congress, and the parts where he was talking about, I'm a governor, I've done this, whether it was on healthcare or housing or so on and so forth. I think he came across as a solid candidate. I don't think he did anything to enhance his standing already, unlike JD Vance. I think when you look at it in comparison, what did both candidates want to do? I think Rohit framed it perfectly, right? Don't do harm to your own presidential candidate. And I don't think either of them did any harm to their candidates, and enhance your own personal standing. I think Walz kept him, hit his notes. He did have a lot of notes, and he wasn't smiling as such or whatever. That's certainly true. In terms of body language, JD Vance did seem more relaxed. But I also have to say that while Walz did not necessarily do anything to enhance his own personal standing, JD Vance turned things around for himself in terms of the public narrative. Democrats, you look at Twitter today, a lot of Democrats are saying that, look, we may not like JD Vance, but he put up a very, very respectable performance, very, very cool and calm. And in fact, this may be controversial to say, but Rohit and I was just saying that on the question of abortion, I want to go back to that. If we could play the clip, I would love to play it to you. But, he didn't go fire and brimstone. He wasn't an extremist on that issue. He was very clear that, look, I know women who have had abortions, who felt like if they did not, they would ruin their lives. And I appreciate, and I think as the Republican Party, we have to win people's trust back on abortion. That is a very empathetic answer.
Very. And I think, I also felt like during the debate that there were times when Tim Walz could have attacked more. I think he was, again, whatever debate preparation was done, I know Pete Buttigieg helped him.
Right.
That will be talked about a lot. But I think there were so many opportunities that Walz could have attacked Vance, and he did not in the way that you would see him. Now, again, we've seen a lot of debates, and we've seen, this is obviously cordial and all that stuff. But I think if you're in the Kamala Harris campaign right now, you probably are having those conversations about, why didn't you go after this? Why didn't you talk about more about the Vance about abortion, him flip-flopping about Trump, the Haitian immigrant thing. He did not go all attack on Vance. And I think from Kamala Harris's campaign, they probably would have wanted him to do that.
So now it's a full sprint in the last month of the selection cycle. But please do stay on India Today Global. We will continue to cover this. Of course, we've got Rohit with us for a while, but of course, he's also going to be extremely busy bringing you the latest insight. Remember, 17 years of experience covering US elections. And of course, I'll also be there covering US politics as well. Thank you so much for watching India Today Global.
All right, now it's time to fact check last night's VP debate, where the truth was twisted, stretched, and sometimes completely dodged. We're diving into the claims made by JD Vance and Tim Walz to see who's got their facts straight and who's just spinning tall tales. First up, JD Vance. So he has claimed that Iran received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets and they used that money to attack Israel. But is it true? Now, the Iran nuclear deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was negotiated in 2015, and this was done during the Obama administration. Now, Trump pulls the US out of this deal in 2018, and the $100 billion figure mentioned by Vance refers to potential sanctions relief, so the unfreezing of Iranian assets. Now, only if Iran completed key nuclear steps under JCPOA, but the deal fell apart and assets are currently frozen. Also, the White House archives cite the US Treasury Department, and they estimate at a little over $50 billion and not $100 billion. So this claim by Vance was completely false. Next up, Vance claimed that the Department of Homeland Security has lost over 320,000 immigrant children over the past couple of years. Now, in this claim, Vance is likely referring to the report by DHS released in August. So, this report found out that between 2019 and 2023, roughly 32,000 unaccompanied children did not show up to their immigration court hearings. Now, that period includes parts of both Trump and Biden administrations. Now, the report also says that US Immigration and Customs Enforcement had not issued court notices to about 291,000 unaccompanied children as of May 2024. Now, Vance is likely adding the two numbers to argue that the federal government lost hundreds of thousands of migrant children. So, the DHS claimed that children who did not attend the hearings can be at a higher risk of being trafficked or exploited. But immigrants can fail to show up to immigration courts for a variety of reasons. Now, this might be because the government does not have the correct addresses on their files. So this claim by Vance is misleading. Now moving to Democratic candidate Tim Walz. Walz has claimed that Donald Trump hasn't paid taxes in the last 15 years. Now, according to a report released in 2022, Trump's tax returns show that the former president paid over $631,000 in 2015, $750 in 2016 and 17, and then $133,000 in 2019. So even though the amount that was paid is debatable, but he surely paid almost $1 million in tax returns. So it can be said that this claim by Walz is completely false. And finally, Walz claimed that the infamous Project 2025 makes it harder to get contraception for women. He even went on to say that the policy document will force women to register their pregnancies. However, Project 2025 does not propose making people register their pregnancy with any federal agency. However, it does call on state reporting of how many abortions take place within its borders. Now, Project 2025 also calls on the Health and Human Services to use every available tool to ensure that state reporting is conducted. So, this claim made by Walz is misleading again. So both the candidates took some creative liberties with the facts, but I guess we can say with the situation how it's folding out in the US currently, this is what politics has become. Moving on now, we were earlier joined by a very special guest who has made waves in American politics. Our White House correspondent Rohit Sharma sat down with former Congresswoman from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard. In an exclusive conversation, the recently turned Republican shared her journey from the Democratic Party and her views of the impending presidential polls. Listen in.
Joining us is Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She has been a leading voice and advocate for President Trump. She's been campaigning across the nation to get President Trump elected. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us today.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Congresswoman, you were a Democrat and you ran a presidential campaign in 2020, and now you have endorsed President Trump. What made you change your decision and becoming, endorsing President Trump, and what was the reason for you to do so?
Oh, first of all, I left the Democrat Party a few years ago because today's Democrat Party is controlled and led by this elitist cabal of warmongers who are undermining our freedom, fundamentally censoring free speech, undermining the rule of law and our democratic republic. There are many examples that I could give you. I wrote a book explaining in great detail why I left the Democrat Party. It's called For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. And in this election, the choice was very clear for me in why I endorsed President Trump over Vice President Kamala Harris. It is because of those fundamental rights and freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution and the words that our founders had for us in this country as Americans, our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Under Vice President Harris over these past 4 years, along with Joe Biden, they have undermined our freedom and continue to do so. They have weaponized government entities to go after their political opponents. I've personally experienced political retaliation by this administration, putting me on a domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies just one day after I did an interview criticizing Kamala Harris's record as vice president and talking to the American people about the dangerous consequences of a Kamala Harris presidency. They have ruined our economy, increased the cost of living. We're seeing increased crime, open borders, over tens of millions of illegal immigrants coming across our borders, many of them actually violent convicted criminals coming from other countries. And on a foreign policy front, they have embroiled us in multiple wars in different parts of the world and have pushed us to the brink of World War III and closer to nuclear war than we ever have been before. On every account, the choice is clear that President Trump in this election is our best hope as a country to get back on that path where we can look to a future of peace and freedom and prosperity for all Americans.
You make, very interesting points, Tim, and I probably should go one by one on that. I mean, so how would a President Trump foreign policy differ from the one that we have in the White House from President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? There are wars, there's a war in the Middle East, there's ongoing war in Russia. I mean, how would his foreign policy differ? And when President Trump actually says he's going to end these wars, I mean, what should Americans, take? Like, should the Americans take it on, on the face value that he will be able to do it?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out that these wars didn't just appear magically out of nowhere in the Middle East. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris had a direct role to play in strengthening Iran and providing them and opening the floodgates of billions of dollars over these last 4 years, providing Iran with the resources to arm and equip and train and fund Islamist terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as the Houthis, who are not only engaging in war against Israel, but are engaging in direct attacks against American service members and our own military in the region. This didn't happen without a cause. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden need to be held accountable for it. And they have showed a lack of leadership in working to bring about an end to these many different conflicts by engaging in direct diplomacy. The same can be said for Europe with everything that we're seeing play out today. President Biden and Kamala Harris instigated and crossed the red line that has long existed for Russia, that Ukraine cannot join NATO. People will say, oh, well, Ukraine can do whatever they want to do, but it is our responsibility, it is our leaders' responsibility to do what is in the best interest of peace and our own security for the American people. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have continued to say Ukraine will be a part of NATO. It should be no surprise that Putin responded by invading Ukraine. And President Biden and Kamala Harris have stood in the way of many other countries' attempts to broker a peace treaty, a negotiated end to this war that not only would have saved many, many Ukrainian lives, but would have made it so that we are not on the brink of nuclear war and World War III, which is where we sit today. Instead of pushing for peace, which is what President Trump has committed to do, even before he is sworn in as president, should he be elected, they have escalated this war. They have blocked attempts to bring about peace. And now they have said they approve these long-range missiles to be launched deep into Russia, which, again, we should be not surprised to know that Putin has responded by saying that should this actually happen, he will view that as a direct war between Russia and NATO and see it as an existential threat, and has authorized the use of his own nuclear weapons, which they have more nuclear weapons than any other country in the world, because they will view this as an existential threat. So we can't say, how will President Trump work to bring about the end to these wars and bring about peace without first identifying that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have largely been the driver and cause of these wars. On what President Trump will do, he believes in leadership. He believes in direct diplomacy, and he's committed to bringing about peace, plain and simple. So he will do what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have refused to do, which is to sit down with Putin and sit down with Zelensky and conduct the kind of negotiations that President Trump has been doing his entire life, and the kinds of negotiations that he did when he was president back in 2016, willing to sit and meet with dictators and adversaries, along with partners and allies, to work towards our collective interest of peace and prosperity for everybody.
Thank you so much for speaking with us as we get closer to the election.
Thank you.
We'll probably talk to you again. Thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful day today. Thank you.
Time now for some quick updates from the political landscape in the US that you might have missed. First up, some Democrats are now worried that the corruption scandal surrounding New York Mayor Eric Adams could hurt Kamala Harris in the presidential race. Now, this comes as Adams, who was hit with a federal corruption indictment last week, suggested that he is the victim of a White House vendetta. The embattled mayor claims that he is a victim of federal payback for complaining about the financial strain of absorbing asylum seekers from the southern border. Next up, Donald Trump has reportedly backed out previously scheduled interview with CBS 60 Minutes show. Now, CBS disclosed that Trump's change of plans just a few hours before the VP debate on their network. Now, with no additional debate scheduled between Trump and Harris, this interview was one of the final times before the election for voters to see Trump up close on a television program. And finally, a Georgia judge on Tuesday is set to consider a challenge to new rules implemented by the state's Republican-controlled election board. Now, this comes as Democrats seek to undo last-minute changes they have said are designed to undermine trust in the results of November 5th US election. Now, lawyers for the election board say that the new rules do not permit election administrators to delay certification. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party believes that the investigations by the panel may cause delays in the election process. Well, that's all we have for you in this edition of Race for the White House. Stay tuned to India Today Global as we continue to bring you more updates on the US elections.